Hello, my name is Amy Sandu. I'm Manager of Sustainability and Government Relations at BASF Canada here at Globe Conference in Vancouver. At Globe, BASF Canada has a live lounge in collaboration with the conference, and our first guest is Axel Meisen. Welcome, Axel.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. So we would love to learn a little bit more about Alberta Innovates, your organization, and your role.
Yes. So I work as a senior advisor for Alberta Innovates, and Alberta Innovates is a provincial research organization funded by the government of Alberta. My role in the organization is to do foresight work, which means futures work. I work on the question, what are the important questions that we should be thinking about in the longer term future? And then how does that guide and influence our current thinking? So a good example of this today would be what are the longer term outlooks for Alberta's principal resource, which is the oil sands.
Yep.
And will those uses over time potentially change, and how do we prepare ourselves for those changes?
So what would you say is your organization, Alberta Innovates' main focus when it comes to sustainability?
We recognize at Alberta Innovates that the uses of energy may in future be quite different, partly precipitated by concerns about greenhouse gas emissions, for example, in conjunction with normal kinds of fossil fuels. So we really asked ourselves, if we don't use oil and gas as energy sources, what can we use them for, and where are the demands? So we looked at the question, what do people need in the future, apart from energy and water and food?
Right.
And we really came to the realization that what people need are materials. So where do these materials come from, and what are these materials? And that's one area that we've really focused in very, very strongly, how to meet the growing needs of Canadians and people around the world in the materials sector.
What are your thoughts on how Alberta Innovates is currently contributing to enabling a more circular economy in Canada?
Well, we build it right into the early thought processes. So for example, if we look at making carbon fibers, there's all sorts of issues of how you make them and how you make them competitively. And then they get incorporated into products. And we've asked ourselves, well, what happens at the end of life of these products?
Right.
You know, do they end up in the landfill?
Yeah.
And the answer should certainly not be yes to that. It needs to be a no.
Absolutely.
Right? So what we're trying to do is avoid the type of problems that the plastics industry, for example, is encountering today.
What are the challenges that make enabling a circular economy so difficult?
I think there are two broad aspects to this. One of them is to have a clearer understanding, and that does involve actually an understanding of the science, you know, what are the material properties. It requires an understanding of how big is a particular problem, you know. And then we have to build the motivation.
Sure.
So you understand the problem, and we portray it very vividly, and we can do this wonderfully now and inexpensively through images and the internet communications. But then doing something about it, other than saying I refrain from buying plastic bags or such like. I mean, there are some things that are not avoidable. If you're a patient in a hospital and you need to have intravenous feeding or a feeding tube, it's going to be a plastic material.
What are your thoughts on the role that the government of Canada can play in enabling this circular economy, in enabling an economy where we're moving away from that linear model to one where we're actually keeping and capturing the value of some of those materials in the value chain for longer than we have done in the past?
So the normal response to that is to take a page out of the book of for example, the European Union, right, which creates directives and regulations. But I think equally, if not more importantly, it's important for members of government to understand and to talk about what needs to be done, rather than just focus on regulations or even funding programs, and have a really deep understanding of what's involved. I think it's also very important that Canada and the governments of Canada, and I include the provincial governments, that they work with each other.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Axel. This has been an excellent discussion with you. I'm really excited about the work that Alberta Innovates does, and very much looking forward to our collaboration in the future. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.